In the 1880s, Canada brought in 15,000 Chinese to build the CPR through the mountains of British Columbia. Their labor came cheap. They'd work for half a white man's wage. Conditions were appalling. Something like 1 in 10 died of malnutrition, exhaustion, accident, or murder. In 1885, when the railway was completed, thousands of Chinese hit the labor market, and the cry went up, "Send them back."
The racial tones of it was obvious because it was a community that was restricted. It had nowhere to go. And literally, if it was possible for the people of those days, they would like to push us right out to sea.
That was impossible. A tax on newcomers to discourage them wasn't. The head tax certificate was what Chinese arrivals got to show they'd paid their $50, eventually $500, to immigrate. It was a prohibitive sum, but still they came.
Nobody invited you here. You came here on your own. You paid the head tax willingly or not, but you paid it for economic and for reasons, to escape the poverty in your homeland.
H.Y. Louis started as a farm laborer in 1896. Eventually, he rented a farm and sold produce in town. By the time Tong, his second child, was born, the business was thriving, but the hard work never stopped.
He had to bring the products of his farm, the produce, driving a team of horses, leaving at 3 o'clock in the morning, get to the market at 7 o'clock and dispose of it, get the cash, and then grab rice and everything, bring it back to the farm. It was a tough existence. But anyway, that was still considerably better than the existence he experienced in China.
The Chinese were only welcome to do the jobs the white middle class didn't want. But white laborers did want those jobs and were angry that the Chinese would do them for less money. But the Chinese had no way to bargain for higher wages. Unions denied them membership. Starting in the 1870s, mobs of white laborers in the U.S. had periodically attacked Chinese workers, destroying their homes and businesses. In 1907, American labor leaders came to Vancouver to speak at a meeting of the Anti-Asian League just a block from Chinatown. Suddenly, the meeting erupted.
They just came roaring through this whole area. They smashed the windows, they beat up people, they looted, and literally trying in the best way they can to, and in the most hostile way they can, to say, get out of here, get out of this country.
In spite of the hostility, Chinatown kept growing. This was the Yellow Peril, the threat that hordes of Orientals, as they were called, would destroy the British way of life. Whites kept pressuring the government to stop all immigration from China. So in 1923, Ottawa passed an extraordinarily racist law known as the Chinese Exclusion Act, for that's what it did. What's more, everyone of Chinese ancestry, even those born here, had to register.
I have a picture of myself in those days, 9 years old even, taking a picture. That's what happened, you see. We had to have it, and we were treated like common criminals, you know.
But you were a Canadian.
Oh, of course.
Were you considered a citizen?
No, you can't vote. You have no franchise. So if you have no franchise, you don't really have any say.
What was left was a sad collection of men, a bachelor society. Because of the head tax, they had left their wives and children in China until they could save enough money to bring them over. Now, thanks to the Exclusion Act, many would never see them again. By 1936, there were 10 times as many Chinese men as women in BC. With so few babies born, Chinatown had lost half its population, and whites restricted business licenses to keep them in their shrinking community.
Most Chinese businesses were localized in Chinatown, where the Chinese live. You see, we call them an unsanitary ghetto, but they were forced into it. Not because you want to, but you were forced into it. So rather than fight, you accept these things.
But in 1941, Tong Louis tired of sharing the family's cramped Chinatown apartment above the company warehouse. When he and his bride bought a house in Vancouver's west side, whites were appalled.
And what do you know? The papers played it up. Oh, first page of the Vancouver Sun. They played it up. And of course, there was a lot of controversy. All the neighbors there didn't want me and so forth, you see, except my next door neighbor who stood behind me all the way. But in those days, it was not acceptable. And many people in Chinatown said, Mr. Louis, I don't think you should really fight with him, you know. Just forget the whole thing. Give him the money back and forget about living there. I said, no, it's not me alone. It's my race of people. I'm looking for a bigger cause than just personal. It's your whole Chinese population are being disgraced. So I had to see this to the end.